Are you the parent or caregiver of a child who's around 4 years old and you're wondering how to help them sound clear, whether they're talking to their friends, kids in their class, or whether they're talking to adults around them? Well, you've come to the right place. This is the second video in a series of 3 videos on helping 4-year-old speech clarity. So you can check out the other 2 videos as well for tips. But meanwhile, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Amini. I'm a speech and language pathologist with several years of experience working with children and their families to maximize speech and language development. I have my own private practice, Murder Speech, in the Bay Area, where I do the same. And my mission with this YouTube channel is to empower parents and caregivers, especially those with children under the age of 5, because this is when a child's speech and language are developing so rapidly, and little changes that you make in the way that you talk and play with your child have huge implications for speech and language development down the line, as well as for just learning in general down the line as well. So let's get into it. My next series of tips, there's 3 of them for helping your 4-year-old sound clear, is to emphasize the final consonant. So let's talk a little bit about this. So there is a phonological process called final consonant deletion. So this is something a lot of young toddlers do. So up to 2 and 3 years old, children will drop their final consonant. So you'll hear a lot of, instead of cat, for example, you'll hear cat, or instead of dog, for example, you'll hear dog. And that's pretty normal when a child is 2, maybe in their first months of 3. But by the time a child comes to 4, they should be pronouncing that final consonant in sounds, and they shouldn't be dropping it when they're saying longer sentences. So even as the sentence gets longer, the final consonants should be there. And if they're not there, it can have a huge implication for how clear they sound. So, for example, the cat is big without a final consonant sounds something like the cat ate bit, which is very difficult to understand. So what you want to do first, here's our first tip, to help your child with sounding clear is to emphasize final consonants as you talk when you're playing or as you talk during daily routines. So let me give you an example. Say you are playing with this shark house with your child. So you can say, this house is a shark shape. So it's a small sentence, but what I did, if you notice, was I said, this house, shark shape. And if you notice, not only did I hold out the consonants, I also added some pops for the consonants. This house, shark shape. And I made sure, even though I was talking very slowly and I had a lot of gaps between my words, I was okay with that if that meant emphasizing those consonants, showing a child that ideally you want to emphasize all the consonants and that you can't make one consonant blurry just because you're making an entire sentence. So you can set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes a day and just talk like this as you play with your child. So for example, the shark is yellow. We could say the fish is orange. It's a boat bed. And you can just keep going with this for 10 or 15 minutes a day. You might wonder, well, I am not making the child say anything. I'm saying everything. That's okay. Your child is going to be listening to the way you're talking. You're one of their primary models, and you doing this will have them start to emphasize their consonants too. You also don't need to worry that your child is going to sound weird overemphasizing things. Normally, if a child is overemphasizing at 4, it'll probably just sound like normal speech. So they're not going to sound weird just because you start doing this. But it is a good practice to make sure your child is not dropping that final sound as their sentences get longer. So that's my first tip, emphasize those final consonants 10 to 15 minutes a day. Be consistent with it if you want to see some progress in what you hear. In terms of specific things to focus on, my second tip is to focus on certain location words. So for example, in is a great word because that N can be emphasized in terms of the final consonant, and in happens all the time. You can talk about putting things in the house. Every time you clean up, you're going to put everything back in. So like bed, in, shark, in. And then when you're taking things out is another great final consonant word. So you can say bed, out, fish, out, shark, out, etc., etc. So in, out, you can do on is a great one. So fish on, for example, or shark on, and same thing with off, right? So you're going to say fish off and shark off, and you can keep going. So in, on, off, and out are easy final consonants because there's only two sounds. There's just the vowel and then the consonant. So you can start with that. And ideally, for my third tip, I would say work towards something called a CVC verb. So a CVC word has a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. And a child should be saying this word shape pretty often at around the age of 4. So in terms of how to do this, I love recommending barn animals or just animals in general because a lot of them tend to be in this CVC format. So for example, dog, D-O-G, dog. So making sure you're getting that initial consonant, sure, but also that final consonant, or pig, or cat, or man, or horse. Horse is kind of a iffy one. You don't need to worry about the R yet. It's a later sound, so you're essentially going to get something that sounds like hoss, and that's okay. Mouse, goat. All of these are great CVC, consonant, vowel sound, and then consonant words that you can practice, and make sure when you're making sentences with them, that final consonant is not compromised. So for example, the dog is big, or the mouse is small, etc. So you can use any sort of barn toy. I like this farmyard heads and tails because it's a matching game, which I tend to use a lot with my preschoolers. So you can focus on CVC words, especially. Maybe you can rotate. So one Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can work on in, on, off, and out, emphasizing that final consonant. Tuesdays, Thursdays, you can work on animals to make sure you have those CVC words. And then maybe the rest of the days of the week, you're just going to emphasize all the final consonants in whatever it is that you're saying. That way you get a good variety in how you're modeling this final consonants for your 4-year-old child. Some things to keep in mind if you are continuing to be worried about your child's speech clarity, it's a good idea to talk to a speech therapist or a teacher or a pediatrician sooner than later. Early intervention is always better because your child's brain is really developing quite rapidly when they're young, and you want to take advantage of that. In terms of other resources, you can check out some of the links in the description box below. There's a link to our mailing list where you'll get a free monthly tip on speech and language development themed to the month. There's also a link to our ebook, parent education course, and there's also a link to some of the materials that I used while demoing in this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this helped you, and happy talking.